Don't go anywhere, David.
Hey?
Don't go anywhere.
Okay.
Yep. Got it.
Kia ora everyone, and welcome to our Kotahitanga webinar on preparation for mediation, the power of doing something different. It's wonderful to see so many of you today, and apologies if you accidentally got rerouted to the Teams meeting. It seems as if technology is thinking ahead of us, one step ahead, and managed to duplicate the Zoom session as a Teams session as well. So thank you if you were one of the people who were in the Teams meeting. Thank you for coming along and joining the Zoom session. You'll notice that we are recording our session today, and the recording will be available afterwards for attendees. So I think we can start. I've just got some people in the waiting room. Just let everybody in. Okay. So for our session today, we're very lucky to be joined by Simon Dadley-Moore and David Robinson. Simon and David are both FDR providers, so they're both mediators that work in family dispute resolution. They are both counsellors, and they both have been integral to the development of our PFM offering at Fairway. Simon and David have prepared a presentation today, which is going to take about 30 minutes. And then we're going to go over to some discussion. And they've both said to me that they're really, really keen for this to be an interactive session, and they're keen to hear your questions and your comments as well. So I'm going to hand over to Simon and David now, who are going to take us through their presentation.
Kia ora tātou. Thank you, Samantha, and thank you all for being here. It was 7 years ago that David and I sort of started on the journey of preparing people for mediation, and we're very passionate about it. We're very excited to be here today. We both talked about what to present and realised we could talk for hours on this, but we want to make today as relevant as possible. So we're going to keep it brief and get to questions as early as we can. I'm going to talk a little bit about theory, and then hand over to David to ground that in the more reality of the sessions. And I'm going to do it, you know, without hopefully too much fluff. I'm going to get straight into it. So this is the power of doing something different. When we look at sort of distilling down really what is PFM, then preparation for mediation is always for me about helping people with the awareness and the tools and the motivation to change the way they engage in their dispute. Because if people can change the way they engage in their dispute, then the dispute itself changes. If we've got two people in a mediation with us, and one half of that system changes, then the whole changes. It has to. And this very much is the power of doing something different. We're often always, as humans, we get tricked into looking that way. If only he would do something different, if only she would do something different. But we disempower ourselves because we have half of it. We've got half the system. And when we look this way, there's a lot more influence we can have. So Fairway's PFM is really a paradigm shift. There has been a shift from the idea that the mediator does it all through into a mediation service which involves a team of specialists, where a holistic approach really can be put together for parties to help them get the most out of their mediation, and in doing so really help mediators get the most out of their parties as well. So back in 2015, this PFM entered into existence through the family scene, through FDR. Very quickly became the cornerstone of high quality PFM for Fairway. The statistics all showed that parties who participated in PFM had a far higher likelihood of a resolution in mediation than those who didn't participate. And it wasn't long before Fairway started to sort of stretch sideways and go, right, where else can we apply this in our sort of mediation practice? And that's where PFM started being offered in the commercial areas. I've prepared people in building and construction, in workplace disputes, relationship property, retirement village disputes, education, and across the board, this preparation for mediation is helping people before they get to mediation really have a look at how they're going to go about it. In some way, almost mediation skills training or mediation skills coaching has been key in all these areas as well. So for me, it all began with a question. And the question was, what are the characteristics of a party that's ready for mediation? And then, so, you know, what would a perfect mediation party look like? And from there, it was all about, okay, you know, how do we take someone from where they are on a journey that gets them as far up towards that readiness as possible? And of course, how do we do it in the limited time we've got? So in the FDR area, we've got an hour and a half with each party. In commercial areas, I often get 2, sometimes 3 hours with people to get them on that journey. Back in on the theory, a lot of this really has been informed by Dr. Alan Watkins. He's a neuroscientist. He works in the behaviour of human performance. He developed this integrated performance model. He was worked in corporate world, in the sort of the entertainment and the sports world. He's worked with relationships, and certainly his work is saying that if we want to improve results, then we have to improve behaviour. I mean, that's quite obvious to all of us, I'm assuming. We have to improve what we do. But giving people skills and helping them upskill in certain areas in terms of their behaviour will not necessarily then equal better results. I think we all, if we reflect on it, can think of times in our personal life where we have known what we want to do. Maybe we want to do more exercise, get fit, lose weight, eat differently, present to people differently. We've got an idea of what we want to do. We've got the skills to do it often. But when it comes to actually following through, sometimes we fall short. Sometimes we get stuck. Things just don't come out the way we wanted them to come out. David plays a lot of golf. I'm sure that he's damn good at putting some days and less good other days. But the skills and the tools are still there. What Alan Watkins found, and certainly behavioural science shows, that if we want to optimize our behavior, then we have to look underneath the surface. We need to optimize the way we think, the way we feel, our emotions. And then in recent years, the neuroscience has shown that we actually need to go down to our physiology, our physiological felt sensations. There's all this, what's going on under the surface, that informs what comes out of us. In many ways, if we want to be balanced in our behavior, we need to be able to regulate the way we think. We need to be able to regulate our feelings and our physiology. And this is key to preparation for mediation. If we want parties to be able to turn up and participate well in what is a difficult environment, I sort of see it like grand final day or exam day. It's probably the hardest time to pull those behaviors off, that they need to start being able to influence and regulate what's going on internally. They need to have an awareness of that. They need to have a motivation to do it, and they need to have the skills to be able to pull it off. So early on, PFM, we developed a model. I'm hoping you can all see that model there on screen. It's got 6 areas. It's not a linear model. It starts in the middle with a relationship, and that's the relationship between a PFM provider and a party. It heads outwards from there, and I'll just introduce them all to you to really understanding, if we head left, the power of doing something different, the power of self-change. Then if we head clockwise around it, identifying what that possible change might be or the changes, then upskilling and providing tools for those changes. We're often still talking in the behavioural area here, and then coming down to really strengthening their capacity to pull that off. And that's going deep down underneath the surface. And certainly the aim being at the end of it all that people leave with a plan not about what they want out of mediation, but a plan about how they're going to approach it. Because I think what people want, I call that the results, the outcome, that's the finish line. And if we use that sort of analogy, it's how people run the race. That always determines what happens at the finish line. It's not where the finish line is. And if people are going to run the race the same way all the time, they're going to get to the finish line with the same result. And that's key here. Now, I want to spend a little bit of time heading back in and sharing this, and then I'll hand over to you, David. The relationship here is key. It's right at the core. Our capacity to help people is directly related to their willingness to allow us to help them. This is the first place, this is the key to PFM, is as quickly as possible, because we don't have long, creating a relationship with people that allow us to take them to places that maybe they didn't think they were going to go. If we're going to start talking about the way they think and the way they feel and their physiology, then people need to be willing to go on that journey with us. And that's this piece of the puzzle. And preparation for mediation done at a high level and done very well has practitioners involved who are exceptionally good at creating this relationship in a very short period of time, often on the phone or via Zoom. This is a high level part of the skill here. It's also a time where we are assessing, triaging, in this time that we've got, where to go, how best to go. That's absolutely key. And I just want to stop here and say that it's in this phase, I think, that this is one of the areas that means that for me, high level preparation for mediation just can't be done by the mediator. It's this relationship, it's this depth of coaching that we go into that is it's not aligned with the journey of the relationship that a mediator has with their parties. And so to have that different, to have a specialist provider doing the preparation and a specialist mediator doing the mediation gives the parties the best of both worlds. I'm happy to talk about that again later. Now, if people are presenting and it's all about the other person, then I'm going to want to take them straight to that understanding that the only way they can, their only influence on the mediation is right here. They're not in control of the mediator, they're not in control of the mediation process, they're not in control of the other party, they're not in control of the other party's process, they're not directly in control of the mediation working, because that involves the other party. Really, they are in control of the mediation not working if they want, because they can walk out, but that's still them choosing their behaviour. And that really the realisation that your only influence, a party's only influence in mediation is what they do, it's what they think, it's how they speak, it's how they listen, it's their attitude, it's how they behave, it's how they negotiate. That's it. Holding their breath, maybe praying, they're about the only other influences they got. And so if they want to have an influence, this is the place of influence. And when people get that, when that clicks into place, it's tangible, you can feel it, you can almost touch it. Significant shifts happen right there. And if it takes 90 minutes to get there, I'm going to spend 90 minutes trying to get people there. If we don't get there, there's no point in going any further. That's the power of doing something different. It empowers people. Okay, I see how I can do something different. Mary's not ever going to, but okay, I can. Now, some people come in already with that. Some people come in going, well, actually, Simon, help me. I've tried everything. I don't know what to do anymore. I'm not sure how I do this. In which case we go straight to identifying, well, what changes might work? And there's tools that we can go through to go, oh, hey, what changes are possible? Some people come in already knowing their changes. Hey, Simon, I really want to make sure that I don't get angry when he does this. I really need to make sure that I can be clear with my words. I actually want to listen because I'm not very good at that. If people already know what they need, then we can go straight to upskilling them in those areas. Which is the skills and tools for changes. But at some stage, we're going to get around to how to strengthen their capacity to do it. At some stage, we're going to get around to under the surface, because if we don't, then all we've really done is helped create shifts at that behavioural level, which is on the outside, it's above the surface, but we haven't really got down to what informs that at an everyday level, and certainly what informs it in a joint mediation meeting. Obviously, as I said, by the end of it, we're looking at creating a plan with people. I'm not surprised anymore, but remarkable in the early days what's achievable in a very short period of time. It really is. If people had told me that, Simon, that could happen in an hour and a half, I would never have believed them before I started doing this work. But that's a brief overview of PFM. I wanted to race through that. I wanted to get that in there for those of you who haven't seen that before. We'll get to questions soon. But David, is there anything that you want to add in there to that, or any stories you want to tell?
No, I don't think so. I mean, you've covered that, that theoretical base. I mean, perfectly, Simon. I can't add anything to that. Yeah. But that's the, I guess that's, having that sort of in our heads. That's now the next stage is when the rubber meets the road. How we engage, how we encourage the parties to want to participate in this. We want to give them the feeling that this is, the first stop on the journey. And I was just talking in supervision the other morning. You might remember that in many ways the PFM provider is like the receptionist in a business. We're the first person that the parties see. It's the first person that the parties hear. And so I suppose in a way we are trying to make the journey for the mediators and for the parties perhaps a little bit more helpful than just cold calling.
Yep.
I guess that's hopefully what we can talk a bit about that when people want to ask questions about that. I can break that down into sort of slow frame by frame by frame if people would like to do that. But
yep. We often talk about, David, getting to the end of sessions, and people would often say, thank you. And I think every PFM provider, we have monthly supervision within Fairway, but as a group, every single one of us has heard so often, thank you, because I really would have gone and stuffed that up. Or, wow, okay, that's given me a lot to think about. I'm going to approach this completely differently now than I was. Mm-hmm. That's something that you hear a lot, David.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
I suppose it's the people that are the most obvious are the people who are angry, and their communication has been anger based, probably for months and years, so we can sometimes say, well, has that worked in the past? Does being angry, does that work? Well, no. Okay, well, we want to then spend some time working on how you can go into a mediation for anywhere up to 3 hours with a mediator and your ex-partner without you feeling the need to revert to being dogmatic and angry and lose the game, really. And then you start from scratch with somebody. Well, how can I am so angry. How can I go into a mediation and not be angry? So then but then all of a sudden we're developing some tools that we can help these parties say things differently. I'm a great believer in trying to influence the way people use language. And I can remember in early mediation training, being asked to conduct an interview for 10 minutes without asking a question, and it's hard because that's how we gather information, is by asking questions. And so with the parties in mediation, in pre-mediation, preparation for mediation, just getting people to be aware of the language that they use, aware of the body language that they bring into the room with them. And if they can get an inkling and an idea that that sort of way of performing hasn't worked in the past, why in the heck should they think, because there's a mediator there to facilitate it, that the communication style is going to be any different? Because we all know that it won't be.
And I think this comes down to patterns, and we all, David, we all create patterns. I've got my individual patterns. I'm waving my hand around at the moment. I'm not thinking about how to do it. It's just happening. Yeah. We have relationship patterns. We have communication patterns, thought patterns, behavioral patterns, and that's how everyone becomes so predictable. And that's our auto settings. So we have auto settings individually, but we have auto settings in our relationships, whether they're couple relationships in the family world, or whether they're workplace relationships, or whether they've, whatever that is, we develop patterns and ways of being around people. And I think that's our auto, or that's that relationship's auto setting. Yeah. They're definitely going to say that. And I'll go, well, if you know they're going to say that, I guarantee you they know what you're going to say in return. Yeah. Now, if people go in there and play out the same old patterns, they're going to get the same old story. This is very much about derailing their patterns. It's about helping them find new ones. Again, doing this work before mediation, but it's also about, mediation on auto doesn't work for me. I mean, if people's auto was going to have worked, they would never have got to mediation. Yeah. They would have resolved it themselves. So they have to go into mediation on manual. And manual is about choosing what you're doing, choosing the way you're thinking, choosing the way you're feeling, choosing the way you're behaving, and doing it in a different way than you normally would. And I think people can, the beauty of mediation is it is an artificial event, and people can pull that off for a period of hours. They might not be able to pull it off on an everyday level. We just default to auto very quickly. Yeah. But people know the date, they know the time, they know the place, and if they're prepared well, they can go in and go, right, this is my manual, and I'm going to approach this manual. I'm going to switch off the auto. And if they're really observing themselves well, they can observe when they're flicking back into auto and flick themselves back into manual again. But this work done at a high level beforehand, has made a significant difference for a lot of people.
And I think that's reflected by the comments that we oftentimes get, is that when I came into this meeting with you, I had a very clear positional idea and attitude in my brain. Yep. And, that we are oftentimes asking the awkward questions. Why do you communicate the way you communicate? And when you know it doesn't work, why do you persist on doing it? And we can then move into talking, well, what are some other options? What are some other ways in which you can, do you have good listening skills? Does your ex-partner have good listening skills? And if the answers are yes, okay, well, that's good. If the answers are no, which usually is, we will say, well, let's spend 5 or 10 minutes on discussing how you can listen a little bit more, a little more skillfully, because we all know that one of the reasons people don't listen in these situations is that they're formulating the next question in their head, and so they're not listening to what somebody else is saying. So, just by helping people know that they need to slow down and take good notes into the mediation, little notes in the margins to stay calm, listen carefully, pause. If you didn't hear correctly, go back to the mediator and ask if they could just rephrase it. Just little things like that.
And the skills to be able to pull it off.
And
in the joint mediation.
Yeah, and the skills to be able to pull it off. And I guess because most people come into mediation pretty cold. They don't know. Until a couple of years ago, everybody said, why do I want to do meditation? And, you know, so it's still very new to people. I would say 95% of the people that we meet have never been in a mediation before. So we're trying to introduce them to a concept that they've perhaps never really understood much about. So it really is communications 101 on many levels. So when parties come into this process, they really don't have much of an idea except their own little positional thing that's in their head. And we begin to ask a lot of why questions, how questions, and get them to discuss, you know, how they like to go about things. Does that work? No. Well, can we try something else? Can we look at how we want to do this?
Okay. So David, I'll share. Just want to share. Well, I want to share with you all just a couple of feedback that I've had over the years. We get the feedback at the end of sessions saying thank you. That feedback's great, but you know, whether or not they're able to then go in the mediation and follow through, that's the feedback that's most interesting to me. So we often get feedback from mediators saying, wow, you must have, some magic happened, or you know, thank you, that was, you know, they were very different from when I first met them when they went into the mediation. We often get that. But I've also put together, if I can get to them, some feedback here, and I don't want to, this one to me always means a lot. I just wanted to thank you for the preparation mediation sessions, the strategies you suggested I managed to implement, which is the key. This is our third mediation in 3 years, and this is the first one where I did not feel the need to buy shares in a tissue company. I didn't share one tear, and therefore was able to think clearly. So this person's relating the fact that because their physiology, they were able to regulate it. They were optimizing their physiology. They were now able to optimize, and their feelings, they were now able to optimize how they think. My thinking was clear, which meant that I could actually put in thoughtful, constructed, and considered and constructive input. So now my behaviours improved. I would like to think I was all those things in the other mediations. However, the stream of tears, I think now, would have distracted from those good things. And you know, quite obviously, the third in 3 years, this was the first one where an outcome came out of it. There's many bits of feedback I could share, but I think my favourite over the years that I've written up came from a building and construction preparation for mediation. I prepared the homeowner, but not the builders. Afterwards, I just got this very simple text. All done, resolution completed, builders are still alive, thanks, you probably saved their lives. And that says it all to me. Yeah, I think that to me ends the presentation stage of today. And David and I would love to field some questions and to bring in and make this more relevant to your needs and what you want to hear today, really. So thank you for listening to that, and let's open it up for questions. Actually, before we open up for questions, David, there was one question that came through on an email earlier today. Did you want to talk to that one first?
Yeah, Trish Blythe, it was you who sent in a question that came in a couple of hours ago, that with PFM, would we make some comments about whether the PFM should happen before or after the IMM with the mediator? And there will be, if I can just, do you want to, is that enough of the question, Trish? That, yeah, okay. I think that most of us that do the PFM work would say that we like to have 2 meetings. We'd like to have an initial meeting before the mediator has the IMM with them, and a second meeting maybe 5 to 7 days before the JMM. The first meeting that I have with people is that I have an opportunity to find out a little bit about them, about how they communicate, about what they're wanting to achieve, what they think is achievable, how they usually conduct themselves in high stress situations. Do they get angry? Do they cry? Do they storm and blutter? Do they flicker their eyelids? And so on. I try to spend some time talking to them about how the process works, what it's all about. I encourage people, if they haven't done so beforehand, to Google the mediator. I always, in the introductory letter that I send to people, I ask people to to Google on the Fairway website or other websites that people are showing up on, is to check out who you're working with. Get some sort of an idea of our profile, what our experience levels are, and the whole range of things that our profiles tell people. I'm actually quite amazed at the number of people who don't. They come into mediations and preparation for mediation, they've got no idea who we are. And so I always encourage people to do that. And that's one of the things that I do in that first meeting. I get them acquainted with the process, and we begin to outline some of the things that they may want to consider doing differently, and so on and so forth. After they've had an opportunity, and to discuss with them a range of questions that they might want to ask the mediator in the IMM. The second meeting is usually a little bit more pointed, really discussing how people want to go about doing things, how they want to put their argument together, things that they may want to introduce, things that they want to make sure that they don't introduce because it will not be necessarily relevant, but really and truly getting people to the point where they can feel a degree of comfort, understanding, confidence, hopefully, that when they're meeting with the other party in the presence of the mediator, that they feel equipped enough to be able to really conduct themselves well.
Yep.
Now, I'm not sure, does that answer your question, Trish?
By all means, turn yourselves off mute and engage with us if it's what you want. So you're asking Trish if that answers your question. Is Trish here?
Yes, hi everyone, and thank you, David and Simon. Look, it does partly, David. Look, I'll be honest. I only recently realised that Fairway, like the duty mediator or the RC, was saying that it would be better to do PFM first. I didn't know that, so my phone calls, my individual meetings are sort of partly practical. When are we going to have the mediation? Where, all that sort of thing. But and of course talking about the issues. I know mediators do this differently because we talked about it at the recent conference. Anyway, I guess I'm just wondering if you could talk more about the reasons. I mean, there is definitely some crossover I see in what I'll say to a party and what you are saying to them. So I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the reason for it first. Like, does that matter that much? Just if you can. Thank you.
Do you want me to do that, Simon?
Go for it, mate. Yep.
In many ways, it doesn't matter. I know some mediators like to be the first port of call, and that's okay. I think if I'm meeting with the parties prior to the mediator, I'm able to discuss with them what they're wanting to bring to the mediation, what their issues are, and when they have the opportunity to meet the mediator, that they're a little bit more able to have a conversation with the mediator about what they want to try to achieve, how the mediator likes to structure the mediation, And those are all things that I know you all do. But I think it's also a bit of an icebreaker to be able to meet someone who is not the mediator as the first port of call, just to acquaint them with the process, and take some of the fear, some of the anxiety, some of the tension and stress that they may be carrying, so that the IMM can be as helpful and fruitful for both the parties and for the mediator.
Yeah, I'll second that, David. I think it's not essential. It's nowhere is it essential. And if mediators prefer to meet with the parties first, I don't see it as my mediation. Obviously it's the parties' mediation, but the mediator runs the show here. I'm getting out of the way, and if a mediator comes to me and says, "Can I meet with them?" I like to meet with them first. I'm not going to interfere with that. I think that there's a lot of things I've learned. It'd be great to do a presentation one day on the things I've learned, maybe the things we've learned, preparing people, meeting with them. You know, literally thousands of people over the years before they've met with their mediator, after they've met with the mediator, before the mediation. And one of the things I've learned is how petrified a lot of people are of meeting their mediator. I would never have really had and I use the word petrified, it might be an exaggeration for some, but not for others. I would never have realized how apprehensive people are of meeting their mediator if I hadn't done this work. And so one of the things it can do is smooth the way into that meeting, into that individual meeting, and help the mediator get more out of it. It also might be that you're not going to get that angry person at you as a mediator. Maybe that person may have, changed a little bit of their narrative or their thinking before they get there. And so that's the idea of best, but it's not necessary.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
There's a couple of questions here from Claudine written down. One is, does the same PFM practitioner work with both parties separately? And that is the norm, absolutely. That they met. One is they're met with separately. They never met with together. That's mediation. But it is the same PFM provider in the majority of cases. If someone requests a different PFM provider, then by all means they get it. But most parties get the same provider, and I think I explain to people that this is not an adversarial process. So different providers might set people up for thinking that well, there's one person over here preparing me, and she's got someone else. It's the same person. We've got the same mediator, the same preparation provider, and we're working towards ending up on a similar page, and that's the process. Now, there's another question here: is there communication between the PFM practitioner and the mediator? Within the FDR space, there hasn't been any communication, any flags that we might get as PFM providers. We would give back to the RCs, and the RC might talk to the mediator, but we've kept it confidential and separate so that the parties can know that when they talk to us as PFM providers, at our end, it goes nowhere. Now, in the commercial area of Fairway, it's been operated quite differently, and there have been times where I've spoke to mediators at length, and it has been exceptionally useful. I think one of the reasons why it's different there, and I'm jumping to my own conclusions here, is because time limitations are different. So within the limitations of a 12-hour model, if the preparation provider and mediator then start talking to each other and claim another half hour, another hour, then we're really starting to lose some of what the parties are getting in their 12 hours. So to me, that's not fixed in concrete, and it might be worth continuing to look at over the years. There are strengths and weaknesses in both ways, but that's my answer to that.
If I can just add something in on that too, I guess that I put in my notes for talking about things today is that it's one of those rather interesting situations where the PFM provider and the mediator were working together but separately.
Yes.
And for any of you who've ever had me as their PFM provider, I probably bombard you with lots of stuff. I tell you, when I've written, oftentimes when I've written to the parties, I tell you when I'm having my first meeting with them, and any mechanical stuff that needs to happen, I always try to send a note to the mediator so that they know where I am in the process. And some mediators, certainly not all, they will reflect back to me at what stage they are in the process so that we can get, so without talking to each other, very, very seldom do I talk with a mediator. But I try to develop the idea that we're working together, but separately. And generally it seems to work.
Yep. Awesome. There's a question here. Can you please explain how clients can access PFM from Alex Ensor? Thank you. Within, it depends where you are. So within Fairway's model, which is the only model I can talk to, then it's embedded into the FDR process, the Family Dispute Resolution. It is also embedded in a different way into all the commercial stuff. People sometimes contact me privately. I know people have contacted David privately. If people working outside Fairway to help prepare people as well. And so I think it's probably about that, you know, answering that question. It's probably about what organisation you work with or whether you're working privately with clients. That would be how you access it, really. If you're outside Fairway, you'd need to be able to contact one of us individually and say, can you do this work?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Now just looking, David, a question, well, just one more question I'll answer, then I'll hand over. There was a question here, Fairway's process of becoming a preparation for mediation practitioner. I think if you're interested, you'd probably have to contact Samantha, maybe. Samantha, you know, there might be a list of people, but we have a team that's been created. I think it got created very much in the early days. There was a new influx a couple of years ago, but it's not a team that regularly gets added to. Yep.
I think that at the moment there are, I think, 9 of us around the country doing this work, you know, in the FDR field. And this is just, I guess, information, is that once a month we have an hour-and-a-half supervision, peer group supervision session, and with the 9 of us. And it's really been, I guess we've been doing it for 7 years, Simon? Ooh.
Yeah. Yep, 7 years, 2015.
And so you really get to know people, and you get to know how they work, and we're really very familiar with each other, and we discuss, you know, because we're all mediators as well, and so being able to get some feedback from others in a very close confidential session is really helpful in developing both our PFM practice and our mediation practice as well.
Yeah.
And
okay.
So I'm a big supporter of PFM.
Yep. David, there's a question from Nurit here. When you come across a high conflict party that sees the joint mediation meeting as going into battle, what are some of the strategies you use?
Oh gosh. Well, I think that probably close to 100% of people arrive in mediation in some degree of conflict mode. They are upset, they're sad, they perhaps experienced levels of humiliation. They are wanting to get the best deal for themselves, I suppose. And I guess one of the things that I'm always trying to come back to is that this is not necessarily about you. This is about the one thing that you have in common, your children. And that you're both wanting to be in this mediation so you can develop a way of being able to be co-parents to the point where your children are moving back and forth between your homes in as seamless a way as is possible. So that's the point where I always keep bringing people back to one. This is about creating a smoother pathway for your children.
And
that's the one thing that, you know, they know that's why they're there.
Yeah, of course, that's the way in the family setting, not always that way in the commercial world. You know, you get the feedback I gave before with the homeowner and the builder. They were never going to see each other again.
Yeah.
There was no shared interest in any future together. I think this is just to add into this. This is where it has to come back into the power of people doing differently, because outright, it's not going to work. If you really want to go into battle, we all know it's not going to work. That's not the setting for it. Now, if you want to go to arbitration or the courts, but, you know, by all means. And I'm going to stay there with people as long as I have to get them to realize there's actually no point in turning up. Are you really going to waste 3 or 4 hours of your life turning up and behaving that way? Because you may as well go and spend some time on the beach or with your friends or your family, or go to work or do something far more constructive and far more fun, because your mediation is going to be none of those. Now, if your idea of mediation is that you don't want an outcome, you just want to go in there and blast someone, then yeah, okay, that's really, that'll work, that sort of strategy, but that's not mediation. And so it's about helping people understand that there is an opportunity here. Yes, you could do it that way. And yes, you'd get your time in the sun. And yes, you get to have to rip the person's head off verbally for 20 minutes before the mediator, or maybe 2 minutes before the mediator shut it down. But it's not going to get you anywhere. Not in terms of a result. Or do you want to try and ring out the 1% chance you think you've got, or the 10% chance you think you've got of actually getting somewhere different? And I often tell people that my job, I think, is trying to double people's chances of getting a result. So if they think they've got a 30% chance, I want to double it. If they think they've got a 5% chance, I want to double it. If you think you've got a 1% chance, I want to double it. And I had a guy say to me one day, "Simon, what's double nothing?" And I said, well, double nothing's nothing. But as a mediator, I've never seen a 0% chance ever. Everyone's got a shot here. But if you're going to bother turning up, and so it's motivational stuff, really, to get them to the point of the strategies are all motivational, to get them to the point of realizing that, okay, there is an opportunity and maybe I could do it differently. And then once you've got them there, then it's about, okay, now what? What else could I do? This is just who I am. This is who I am, Simon. I'm really, I am reactive, and I am pissed off. But once we've got their buy-in to look at it, then it's about taking them on the next step of the journey. I hope in the time we've got, that gives you between David and I, we've given you some good answers there. Now, what else is on the list? There's a question about whether mediation is, whether PFM is funded. Certainly through the FDR field, mediation is funded. So state funded FDR mediation, state funded PFM. In the commercial areas, it's not. I mean, those mediations aren't funded. So the PFM is not funded in that way. Again, best answer I can give there. But yep. Go for it, Samantha.
There's the next question around whether PFM through interpreters is helpful.
Yes. David, do you want to start with that one? Have you done preparation for mediation through interpreters?
I don't think I have, but I've done some mediations with interpreters.
Yes.
I remember doing a mediation where with 2 profoundly deaf people, and the interpreters, the signers, were going flat out, and it was the first time in my life that I'd ever been involved in a major discussion where nobody looked at me. And sometimes when you've got interpreters, you run the risk of the interpreter actually being the party, and that they actually will take over. It's difficult. It's difficult with interpreters.
I've certainly prepared a few with interpreters, so I can speak more to that, which is absolutely, it's helpful. I mean, we've got this, as I presented the idea for you before. We've probably all, if we wanted to spend time, we could all start to create a list of characteristics of someone who's exceptionally ready. The party we'd all love to have in mediation every time. And then we get people who they're wherever they are on the scale of close or far away from that, and then we're taking them as far down as we possibly can towards that. And so with the limitations we have now, I think that working with interpreters, which I've done a lot in preparation, I have done a lot actually, the getting down into the physiology stuff's a lot more difficult. Culturally, that can be a lot more difficult. Some cultures are a lot more willing to let us to go deeper than others, is my experience. Some cultures are more highly reflective than others, as a generalization. But it is exceptionally it's helpful, because it even if it takes someone from here to here. And that's what a lot of people where English is their second language, again, not only do they have the trauma and the difficulty of the scenario they're in, but they then have the anxiety and the stress of going into a service of mediation. Generally, if they're going to need interpreters, generally they're going to need an interpreter in there as well, and the mediator speaks English. And so there is there's another layer of stuff to work through in terms of anxiety behind that. And I think it's really useful for people to have the opportunity. You can get a lot less far in the time because things take longer, but there's still significant shifts in my experience. Yeah. There's also in the chat a nice heads up for you, Samantha. You've worked with interpreters before, and someone's given you the seal of approval, or not someone, Eva has. Question: have you ever had any cases where the court has ordered mediation over PPPR matters, which I'll need a translation of that, and if so, was there any access to the consolidated court fund to pay for that? Susan, can you tell me what I think the answer is going to be in my question, which is, can you tell me what a PPPR matter is? If you're Susan, sorry, Susan, you asked the question.
Paul might be able to help us.
Yeah,
Yes.
I was going to say, Simon, I think that's probably a broader question for Fairway.
Yes.
I am certainly aware of cases which have been referred to mediation for PPPR Act matters. So we can certainly accept those referrals. I can see PFM as being very helpful in those cases. Unfortunately, to answer Susan's question directly, I haven't seen any success, I guess, with a request to access the consolidated court fund to fund mediation. So it's often up to counsel, or in my experience anyway, counsel to ask the court for specific directions, referring the parties to mediation with your preferred provider. The court can then make those directions, but unfortunately the costs will ultimately fall with the parties. And it's a great idea, though, that funding should come from the consolidated fund. And I think, yeah, Susan, you've given me a good idea to follow up on. So thank you. And I hope that answers the question.
Thanks, Will.
Awesome. Thank you, Will. Any other questions at the moment? Either send them in the chat or come and speak to us personally. Open up, press your mute button, unmute, and say hello. We've got an opportunity. We're here.
Samantha's got a question.
I've got a question.
Yes.
Has anybody had to make a call as a mediator? I mean, sometimes I've had a situation where really, in terms of traumatic post-traumatic stress disorder, you know, like it was really severe, or where I've really thought this is very marginal, whether a person can actually engage in the process just because they simply do not have a capacity for complex decision making or complex processes. Has anybody had to make kind of referral around sending somebody to court because you had to make judgment around this?
Sandra, is that a question for David and I as preparation for mediation providers, whether we've done that? David, is it okay if I chip in first?
Yeah.
Sandra, thank you for the question. It's a great question. And I do, and I'm sure David does as well, meet people where it is questionable whether or not they're going to be able to participate due to trauma, PTSD, whatever. Now, for me, I don't see it as my call. I see what I do as a preparation for mediation provider is I wave that flag with Fairway. I speak to the RC or the duty mediator. I make sure they speak to the mediator, because I think it's the mediator's call whether a mediation goes ahead. It's not ours. We're there to help the parties get as ready as they can possibly be. But I think at the end of the day, I meet with a lot of people via Zoom or over the phone. The mediator might meet with the party face to face. And I think it's really the mediator's job to decide for themselves with the information provided really and their own assessment as to what goes on from there.
I think I'd just like to add just a quick statement. I think that because we are oftentimes the first port of call, we can sense that there are some people who are really going to struggle for a range of reasons, like the ones that you brought forward there, Santa. And I think that you and I have sometimes once had a conversation about somebody, I think it was you, where we had a conversation as to whether someone was going to be able enough to participate in a meaningful sort of way in a mediation. And I think it's probably part of my role, if I sense that there is somebody who's really going to have a difficult time, to make that known to the mediator, not in any sort of judgmental telling the mediator what to do sort of way, but just to alert them that there are some very delicate issues that they may need to be aware of, and so that they can just have a little bit of a heads up on how they want to traverse. It's once again, it's that we're working together but separately, but sometimes we can be working together not quite so separately.
Yep. Awesome. Trish?
I just hope I have not overstepping someone else with a question.
No.
It's probably for both of you. In that situation you were just talking about, do you feel you need to get the client's permission to go and talk about these things with the mediator, or because I know, David, you and I also, you sent me a message about someone which was very helpful, but do you feel you need the client's permission, or do you feel you are able to just contact the mediator?
I feel that I can go directly to the mediator.
Yep. I would have I feel, I mean, obviously there's limitations to confidentiality, isn't there? There always are. I think I always talk to parties first. I would always ask them that they share it with their mediator. I would, if it was really important and I couldn't, and of course I can't guarantee they're going to share it with the mediator. They say they're going to. Then I might say to them, are you okay if I share it as well? So I would do everything I possibly can to get their permission. But obviously if it's I had one in the early days where the guy said to me, I hope there's some security guards there, because when I see her, I'm going to leap over the counter and I'm going to thump her. I don't think his words were thump her, but he's certainly going to lean out. He was going to get up the table. And I sort of said, well, have you talked to Fairway about that? The screening notes. And he was like, no, I'm just talking to you right now. Now, I don't need permission to share that. I'm going to share that regardless. But in most situations, I am going to want to talk to the party themselves and work through it with them.
I think that if I had an inclination that there was a potential trouble physically, with somebody who was going to be in some degree of danger, I think it would be something that I would probably just give the mediator a wee heads up on.
Yep, absolutely.
Just mindful to be careful.
Yep.
So what I'm hearing from both of you then is that those, I suppose those limits on our confidentiality as mediators directly apply to PFM providers. And when there are those safety concerns, then, to the party themselves or another party, then we have that obligation to make sure that it's a safe process for everybody.
Yeah.
But that ultimately, the mediator will be the person who will decide on suitability for mediation.
Yep.
And I think we have to be mindful of our own safety too, Sam, I've had some fairly volatile people in my time, and I don't scare easily, but sometimes people can be very difficult, and we just need to be able to read the signals really well. And if I feel that I've read some signals that I think someone else should know about, I have no problem in just not being judgmental, just be aware.
Yeah.
Be careful.
So Samantha, are we wrapping up now?
We are.
We're wrapping up now. Can I just be cheeky enough before we wrap up to share with people that I'm about to start a YouTube channel, and I'm going to put weekly content on there to do with leveling up people's conflict IQ, their communication, stuff that'll be really relevant for parties about to turn to mediation, stuff that's probably relevant for all of us. And if anyone wants to be notified when that happens, if you head to simondadley-moore.com, the website's not up yet, but it gives you an opportunity to put your email address in there, and then I would be able to keep in contact with you and let you know when that happens, because I'm really hoping that that's another resource that people can have for their parties before they meet mediation. It'll just be there online on YouTube for people to plug into.
Thank you, Simon. Thanks for sharing that. That sounds really exciting.
Yes.
I'll be looking forward to. I'll go put my name on that list.
Yes, thank you.
That's awesome. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. And again, thank you so much to Simon and David for sharing all your expertise with us. As you said at the beginning, Simon, it is a team approach. I think modern mediation, it is around surrounding parties with the experts and the expertise that they need to have those great outcomes. And as an FDR mediator, I'm sure like many others on this call, we all say a lot of silent thank yous to the PFM providers when we are getting ready for mediation and also during the session. And I completely agree that those shifts that we can see from when we first meet parties to when we get to the mediation, I'm always saying that silent, thank you for PFM. So thank you guys. And it's been wonderful to see all of you lovely faces this afternoon. So it's Thursday. I can't believe it's Thursday already, but we're almost at the weekend. So have a lovely weekend. If you're in Auckland, if you're like me, then you will be hoping that the grey days are going to end, because I think this is day 5. We've all had enough now. But anyway, I hope you all have a lovely afternoon, and thank you again, and thank you for all your questions.
You all.
Bye-bye.
Awesome.
Thanks, everybody. Great to see you. Cheers. Bye.